I think I reached my streaming low point this past December and January when here in Ontario, Canada, we were heading into yet another stretch of virtual school. Like most of you, I had already spent way too much time watching shows, streaming movies, new and old. And in this stretch, though, I knew I had a problem. When I not only watched all three seasons of Cobra Kai in 3 consecutive days, season one day, season 2 the next day, season 3 the next day, I also, along with my daughters, I should add, watched the HSM TMTS holiday special. I needed help. And no, I can't tell you that I stopped streaming and starting reading books instead, although I have read a few books lately. And I can't tell you that I stopped streaming and started training for a half marathon, although I did start doing length swims again at the local pool when it was open. I was still going to stream, but I needed a more noble mission. And thankfully, my daughter Catherine supplied me with one. She suggested that we rewatch all 23 movies of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, except this time we would watch them in chronological order. That is, the order in which they take place rather than the order in which they were released. So this goal energized me and also fit in well with getting ready for the newest additions to the MCU, which were coming out on Disney+, WandaVision and The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So beginning in January with Captain America, the First Avenger, and ending in April with Spider-Man Far From Home, we faithfully rewatched all 23 movies of what we call the MCU in chronological order. I felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. However, back in class a couple weeks back, it became apparent to me that I had maybe spent too much time invested in this MCU universe that, while fascinating, was nonetheless not real. This hit me while we were playing what I call info sheet game in one of my Google Meets. Now, info sheet game, for those of you that are not familiar with it, is like most teachers, when I meet a new class, I have them fill in student information sheets. The information sheets give me a chance to find out a little bit more about our students. So I will ask things like, things they're involved in at school when they're happening, things they might be involved in outside of school, part-time jobs, favorites in the categories of like movies or music or food, sports teams they cheer for. If they could talk to one person, past or present, who would it be? Interesting items like that. And then once I have all the info sheets collected, we play what is called info sheet game, where I will pick a piece of trivia from a person's info sheet, and we as a class will try to guess whose sheet it is, and we'll go through, and eventually we have a question and a piece of information from everyone. So on the sheet in front of me, I selected this particular piece of information, and I asked this question. I said, when school sports and activities were on, this is what I saw on the sheet of paper. When school sports and activities were on, this person whose sheet I had in front of me was a member of our school's rugby team. Except, well, that's what was on the sheet in front of me. What I said to the class was this. I said to the class, before the blip, this person in our class was a member of the boys rugby team. Now, for those of you not familiar with the MCU, and I will try to minimize spoiler alerts for you, the blip refers to a fairly monumental event that directly impacted half the population of the world for a 5-year period. So what I was realizing was that in my head, I was already starting to make the connection between comparing life before and after the devastating impacts of the blip in the MCU to thinking about life before and after the devastating impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic in real life. Once I explained what was going on in my head to my class, we continued on and finished up info sheet game. Later that day, when telling my family about my blip reference at the dinner table, I began to wonder if maybe there was value in all that time spent watching all 23 movies of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in chronological order. Maybe there were leadership lessons that might make valuable takeaways for a group of over 20,000 student leaders and staff from around the world. And lucky for me, I was going to be talking to such a group. So, hot off the presses and fresh for you today, let's go into the multiverse and look at leadership lessons from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Lesson number 1 comes to us from Doctor Strange. Following Spider-Man Homecoming and preceding Black Panther in chronological order is the film Doctor Strange. This story of world-class surgeon Stephen Strange, who is unbearably arrogant and difficult to live with, even before his life is shattered by a car accident that costs him the use of his hands. Now, unable to face life after the loss of his value as a surgeon, Doctor Strange goes to the ends of the physical world and beyond to find healing. His search brings him to learn at the feet of the Ancient One, a seemingly timeless sage who trains Doctor Strange in the world of magic and spells. And while Dr. Strange makes great progress and becomes a huge ally in helping fight those who would use the ancient arts to harm, Strange does get one more significant lesson from the Ancient One close to the end of the film. In a key conversation, the Ancient One explains to Dr. Strange, and I quote, "Arrogance and fear still keep you from learning the simplest and most significant lesson of all." Dr. Stephen Strange asks, which is? The Ancient One replies, "It's not about you." So the first leadership lesson from the Marvel Cinematic Universe is, it's not about you. I often refer to this concept as servant leadership. I've also seen it referred to as service leadership. But both terms are instructive, as at the heart of them is the understanding that as a leader, your first priority is to put the needs and interests of others ahead of your own and to serve others. This is such an important concept in leadership that I actually wear this bracelet. I don't know if you can see it. It says, "I am second." And this works as a reminder for me to remember that it is not about me, that others are first. I am to be second. And sometimes I think one of the best ways to change our perspective and to move our focus away from things we may have lost or disappointments we might be facing is to indeed serve others. So wherever you are today, take a moment and see if there might be a way to reach out and help someone else, to put yourself second, if you will, because it's not about you. For our second lesson, think 100-0-0, I'm going to plunge into the recently released and completed 6-part series which followed the 23 movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Now, first of all, think 100-0-0 is a takeoff of what we know as the 20-60-20 rule. Now, if you're not familiar with the 20-60-20 rule, I'll explain it quickly. The 20-60-20 rule is sort of a concept in student leadership that helps us sort of understand sort of maybe the makeup of a typical school that we're trying to reach and involve in activities and build community and relationships in. And the 20-60-20 refer to 20% of the school that is going to be excited and interested in whatever activities you run because it's school and they love school. So if you're doing a polar bear dip on January 10th and you're cutting a hole in the local pond and everybody's jumping into the cold water, 20% of your school is in. They're in, it's school, they're going for it. The other 20% in the 20-60-20 formula are those people who are not at all interested or connected to school at all. It doesn't matter what you do, they're not doing it, they don't do school. So you could be giving away free $10 bills in the calf stage at lunch, and 20% of your school is like, hey, that's school stuff. I don't do that. They're walking out of school, spending their own money at Tim Hortons and maybe coming back later. And then the 60% refers to that sort of larger group in the middle, the group that you're sort of trying to persuade to follow the 20% of people that are into school rather than following the 20% of the people that aren't into school. So that's sort of the 20-60-20 concepts. I prefer a concept known as 100-0-0. The thing I didn't like about the 20-60-20 concept is I didn't like the idea of just writing off 20% of the school that we're never going to reach them. And I'm not suggesting that you're going to have that single magic event that reaches 100% of the people in your school. That event simply doesn't exist. However, I think as a viewpoint or as a paradigm, thank you, Molly, looking at your school and thinking over the course of a year, is there something we can do that 100% of the school over time, eventually everybody will have connected to something or found something to engage in or something to connect with. Another way to think about 100-0-0 is also looking at the composition of your leadership group. Does it reflect the population in your school? Is it made up of only those people who are the 20% who love school anyway? Do you have some of those people that are maybe from the 20% who wouldn't normally be involved in school activities? Their perspective might help you. So that's the sort of the mindset behind the 100-0-0, both looking at the people you serve and trying to serve everybody eventually, and making sure that your group reflects the entire school. So how does this connect to the Falcon and the Winter Soldier? Well, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier is set in the time after the blip, which again, I'm not going to go into too much detail about. But suffice to say, there's all kinds of dislocation, all kinds of voices not being heard, unprecedented social unrest. The Falcon is brought literally face to face with past injustice, and there are problems that seem too big to solve. Now, as I was watching this 6-part series, I couldn't help but notice the similarities between the world after the blip in that particular series and some of the similarities that we're seeing in our pandemic world and the world that we're looking to build after the pandemic. So as student leaders, I ask, will we think 100-0-0? Will we work to fix systems that have worked in favor of some and against others? Will we look to bring voices to the table that maybe have gone unheeded too long? Will we face past injustice? Will we work towards healing? Will we bring forward new heroes and new leaders? And will we support them in their work? Those are big questions, but I'm certainly confident that student leaders today are equal to those tall tasks. Lesson number 3. Like in our real world, things in the Marvel Cinematic Universe are not always as they appear. Sometimes it's important to look past appearances. Now, one thing to keep in mind when looking past appearances for those of you who may have just joined in is that the person in front of you speaking right now with black rimmed glasses, very little hair, wearing a superhero t-shirt is not Ian Tyson. This is Jeff Gerber, and I am speaking to you about leadership lessons from the MCU. And it may look like I'm talking to you from like the corner of my bedroom, but you may never know. It might actually just be the latest and realistic backgrounds from Zoom. Peter Parker learns about looking past appearances twice, actually. In Spider-Man Homecoming, Parker is trying to balance life as a high school student with also being the new Avenger after bursting onto the scene in Captain America Civil War. While battling the villain, the Vulture, and asking Liz Toombs to the homecoming dance, he is shocked when going to Liz's house before the dance to learn that Liz's father is actually the villain he has been battling. So things did not quite look like they appeared in the Toombs household. Spider-Man once again learns to look past appearances in Far From Home, as he makes the nearly fatal for the planet decision of believing Quentin Beck, aka Mysterio, is a hero worthy to be trusted with Tony Stark's Edith defense system. Captain Marvel, of course, is chock full of needing to look past appearances as the shape-shifting Skrulls cause all sorts of problems on planet Earth before convincing Captain Marvel and others that they are indeed not the enemy. And based on their tough exteriors and appearances, you might not be able to guess which Avengers end up making the ultimate sacrifice to bring humanity back after the snap. And if you're not that far, of course, I'm not going to give you that particular spoiler alert. And not only is there a lesson there to look past appearances when it comes to looking at the outside of others, I think there's also an important reminder here to check what we are presenting to others versus what we actually are as well. In a civics course I'm teaching these days, we spend some time talking about ways that people can live better together in groups. And we watched some virtual assemblies on topics like love and kindness and honesty. And in one of those, one of my favorite speakers, Tyler Durman, makes this statement: "You can't be loved if you are not known. You can't be loved if you are not known." And there is some profound truth in that statement. I don't think Tyler means by this that you are to bare your soul to anybody and everybody. But I think what it does mean is that it's important to your sense of love and, may I say, belonging, that beginning with those who are closest to you and those you can trust, that you let them know your highs and your lows, your good days and your bad days, and what makes some days better than others. I was challenged last week by another talk I heard where the speaker explained that, while yes, you can bury your emotions, you need to know that when you do, you bury them alive, and you may not know when those emotions will resurface and the effect they may have. So be careful not only to look past appearances when dealing with those around you, but even more importantly, for your own wellness, make sure that the people closest to you in your life can share your true self and see past your appearances. Of the 23 movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I think the one I found the least exciting to watch was Captain America Civil War. And I think this is because I did not enjoy watching the relationships within the group deteriorate the way they did. One of the things I've come to believe is that the biggest ship in leadership is relationships. And I think the importance of relationships is another lesson I'm reminded of from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And this would be lesson number 4. The breakdown of relationships in Captain America Civil War was a serious problem for the Avengers. The group had just banded together to safeguard humanity from Ultron, and now they were lined up in Team Cap versus Team Iron Man, literally fighting each other. They lost valuable time and energy focusing on their problems instead of keeping their focus on the main issue. I would suggest as student leaders, focusing on relationships has never been more important. With all the disruptions to our school year over the last 14 months, the large events and social gatherings we have often counted on to build connection and relationship in our school have either been canceled entirely, relaunched with smaller groups, or offered in some new virtual format. Our usual world of student activities and student leadership was sort of like crop dusting, where we could fly over, if you will, and provide common experiences to build relationships for hundreds and hundreds of students all at once. Now, many of us are maybe in cohorts, or like us here in Ontario, not even in school at all. So more work has to be done on connecting with individuals and following up with friends and family one at a time, holding each individual plant and relationship, if you will, versus flying over and crop dusting entire classes or grades or schools at a time. Now, it's important to remember that after the breakdown of Civil War, though, It is the relationships that kept the Avengers going through their darkest times and their biggest battles, and did allow them to ultimately overcome in Endgame. And one of the biggest needs of young people today, and in fact across society, is the need to belong. Young people today report to be less connected, more isolated, less happy than previous generations. The U.S. Surgeon General has reported that loneliness is a negative impact on public health, almost on the same levels as obesity and smoking. And where does belonging come from? I believe a sense of belonging comes from relationships. Think of your favorite classes. I think the biggest factor in whether a class becomes your favorite or not are the people in the room and whether you have quality relationships with them. You may not like the subject. You may not even maybe get along with the teacher. But if there's a large group of people in that class that you have positive relationships with, that's a class that you're going to feel like you belong in and that you're going to look forward to going to. Similarly, you may like the subject matter, maybe even like the teacher. But if you're in with a group of people that you haven't necessarily connected with or established relationships with, it probably isn't one of your favorite classes. So one of the biggest challenges today, and this has only been exaggerated, of course, by the pandemic, is to build relationships and a sense of belonging in your school community. I believe it will take the best of you as student leaders and the groups that you work with to rebuild relationships and the sense of belonging in your school after the worst of this pandemic is behind us. You may have heard the adage, society grows best when older citizens plant trees under whose shade they'll never sit. That's actually a favorite quote from Scott Hamill, a good friend and speaker. He's been entertaining us throughout the day today and is actually wrapping the whole conference up tomorrow. So make sure to take in Scott every chance you get. But this idea of looking out for those who will follow you, of what I call leaving your school a better place than you found it, is the last lesson about student leadership that we will draw from the Marvel Cinematic Universe today. For the Avengers, the idea of planning ahead for those who will follow is shown in Iron Man's development of the Edith defense system, which I referenced earlier. I will not unpack the acronym in the name of spoiler alerts. And not only did he develop the Edith defense system, he also identified the young Peter Parker as someone who would be a future leader to keep the world safe and who could be trusted with Edith's power. Now, we learned, as we saw in Spider-Man Far From Home, this succession plan may have had its hiccups. But the point for us as student leaders, and especially the staff advisors listening in today, is that you should always be thinking about who you can be building into that will continue your work as a student after you graduate or as a staff member after you move on to another school or retire. And the most recent lesson, of course, for planning for the future and developing future leaders comes from The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Now, since this is one of the most recent developments in the story arc, and with the new Captain America carrying the shield in a future upcoming Captain America 4, I will again minimize spoiler alerts. But suffice to say, that like Tony Stark's plan for Peter Parker to be a future leader, the transition from Steve Rogers to the new Captain America is also not a smooth one. But it marks the kind of bold vision for leadership in the future that I think we can all get behind. So there you have it. I hope my time spent rewatching all those movies did have a larger purpose. They say life imitates art, and I think sometimes you can learn about life from art. So from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I learned some valuable leadership lessons. And if one or two of them resonated with you today, then I think our time together will have been well spent. Remember that as a student leader, as we learned from Dr. Strange, it's not about you. Remember to think 100-0-0. Remember, as Spider-Man learned twice, look past appearances. And as Tyler Durman reminded us, you can't be loved if you are not known. Remember that the biggest ship in leadership is relationship. Let there be no civil war among your leadership groups. And remember that in all you do, the long-term vision is to leave your school a better place than you found it, and to build into those who will do that, like Tony Stark and Captain America did. It will be so awesome when, like the Avengers, we will be able to assemble again together in person. I'm just looking forward to that so much. In the meantime, in the words of young Morgan Stark, I love you all 3,000. All the best as you continue the important work of student leadership. I know our world can use a few heroes, and it has been a privilege to talk to so many of you heroes from around the world today.